Hello. Today, I want to talk a little bit about beauty and men and intimacy and sex and moving through the world as who you really are. And I want to firstly begin with sharing a little bit about my own journey with beauty and really anchoring into who I really am at my core. Now, you hear this a lot in the online space about just be yourself, just say what you want, just be yourself, just say what you want. And in my experience, if you are somebody that has self-abandoned and you are somebody that has been deeply hurt and has hurt others and created a life that you realize you weren't really living your life and it was somebody else's dream and all of that kind of thing, to turn around and say, oh, just be yourself, is not easy. And it's an untangling process. It's an unwinding process. And it's definitely been that for myself. And I think up until this point now, I can actually say that I am more me now than what I have ever been my whole life. And what a journey it has been to get here. And I feel like I'm only just beginning. The first thing I wanted to really touch on, to really talk on, really speak about are the feminine archetypes. And some of us will resonate with certain archetypes and not so much with others. And there will be some archetypes that we will feel that we need to bring more into our lives, and others where we just, don't really want to. And I'm going to use myself as an example here as, for example, the archetype of queen has never really resonated with me. And about 18 months ago, I really went into the archetypes, and the queen just wasn't one that I really wanted to do much to do with. And I thought that I needed to do a lot more work around it. So do more work around it and, start liking the queen. And, people see me and they'd be like, oh my God, you're such a queen. And I don't resonate with the frequency of queen. However, I am a badass like a queen, and I can get things done, and I can be, disciplined when I want to be and things like that. But the archetype just really doesn't sit well in my body. And the archetypes that always have, and I had such shame around up until very recently, and I'm still working through only a little bit when they comes up here and there, the Muse and Eros-Lover. And definitely what I found recently or even today is that really bringing through more of a Vixen into my being, through my being and through into my essence, to bring out and emanate into the world. And when I was younger, I had a lot of shame around this. And I was a kind of a young girl growing up that, boys just flocked to me. I didn't have to do anything. It was just a thing where they just came to me. And I worked in bars in my early 20s, and my bosses would always look after me really, really well. When the footy players came down for their yearly trips, he'd never let me go out and be like serve them, because he didn't want their energy around me, and he said, you stay inside. And I always had this way of knowing what men liked and what men wanted. the playfulness, and I could like feel them, and it's just something that I always had. And I went through the phase of the couple of years of my early 20s as well, of sleeping around a little bit, and men healed between my legs as well, and I loved it. And it was like nourishing. It was nourishing for me, and also for them. Like, I'd always be called beautiful, and I'd go out to a club, and a guy would take me home, and they'd say to me all the time, "Oh my God, I just picked up the most beautiful girl in the club." And I'd see him again the next weekend out, and we'd talk and we'd chat, and it would be great. And it was like I always had this kind of way with men. And also, of course, in my early 20s, there was a mix of manipulation sometimes to get things from them. Then there was a mix of codependency while I was still trying to work myself out. But at the core of all of it, there was this thing that I felt like I was really born with, where I just knew. And it's like I just knew, like, that they liked being around me. I didn't understand it and stuff. And, then I started, receiving things from other people like, "Oh, you're a slut, and you're this and you're that." And that put a lot of shame on who I was. And I started to self-abandon. And girls would stop wanting to stand next to me, and they'd say things like, "We can't stand next to you because you're going to get the hot guys that we want." And my heart broke. Like, my heart really broke, and I started to feel like there was something wrong with me. And I've always been the sort of a person that I was just an elite at everything as well. It was like I'd set my mind to something, I'd achieve it, and it would be easy. I was a state runner. I would just anything that I wanted to do. Like, my body was great. I had to just think about how I wanted my body to look, and like a couple of days later, it would kind of morph itself. And I really didn't have to do anything to receive what I wanted. And I ended up feeling very alone, and I felt like my friends would always leave me, and then they'd sleep with my ex-boyfriends, and like it was just a disaster. It was a disaster. And then I started to cover up who I was. And then I started to self-abandon. Instead of loving men, I started to emasculate them. Instead of really hanging out with the people that I wanted to hang out with, I would just have the boring conversations, and I would just fit into a conversation about the weather, just because I wanted some kind of acceptance. And I thought that who I was bad. Like, I was a bad person. And so my beauty was a part of this as well. And it was like, okay, I'm not allowed to be beautiful. And this is all unconscious. Like, I didn't know what was going on at the time. It's only until I really started to unpack all of this stuff that I'm like, oh, this happened, and oh, I created this story and everything like that. And it was like I decided then at one point, it was like, okay, I'm allowed to be pretty, but I'm not allowed to be beautiful. And I'm allowed to either be pretty on the inside and not pretty on the outside. I'm not allowed to have all of it. And this started the spiral of self-abandonment. And then, like, the Muse, like, don't do that, people are going to think you're a slut. Like, don't do this, then people are going to think this. And it was literally, I was like catering around, like, to what people were thinking of me, and making sure this person was okay, making sure that person was okay. And so I became kind of like a good girl, but really not in integrity with myself. And I had really low self-worth as well. And so, it's not really until I started to really unpack all of this and really get into the nitty gritties and into my unconscious as to what is playing out here. Like, who am I really? Like, there was a point where I was like selling things in my business, and I'm like, I don't even want to be selling this. It's boring. And then realized that I want to be talking about Eros. I want to be talking about love. I want to be talking about men. I want to be talking about women loving men and women surrendering to men and bringing out a woman's natural, beautiful essence. And like that really lit me up. And you know, when you get to a point in your life, whatever that may be, where you've had enough of something and you're like, I am done. I'm done. I'm done. I'm done. And I really hit this point again earlier this year, and I was just done. I was done not being myself. I was done with worrying about, hey, if I'm going to shine like this and someone's going to leave, which has been my experience. I hit this peak of being really bright, and it's usually the people closest to me that'll leave my space or that get triggered. And it's like I'm a walking trigger. Like I even had a cry about this morning with my mentor Richie, and I went into this beauty, and I'm like, I just feel like as soon as I start to shine, I upset people, and the last thing I want to do is upset people. I'm at the point now where I'm like, oh, it's just what it is. But for years it was like, I don't want to upset people. Like, I don't want to stand next to your boyfriend. You think that I want to fuck him because I'm just standing there. Like, it hurts. It hurts. And so, you know, like I'm in such devotion to bringing out a woman's essence, her inner and outer beauty. And when I first had my beauty salon, I had women on the bed, and they'd start talking to me about sex, and they'd start talking to me about their partners. And, you know, I had my own, my husband at the time worked in the mines, and I had like a salon at the back at home, and I waxed the miners' wives. And, you know, out in the middle of nowhere, the miners' wives were just like so ecstatic. They had this like beautician. and it was really like, I decided like I really want to bring out a woman's essence, like inside and out. And then life happened again, and I abandoned myself. And, you know, I'm sharing this video today because who you really are is who the world needs. And for me, like, I'm a woman that can sit like in a room and have men show up and just serve me. And I used to have a lot of shame around that. Like, I was doing something wrong because my friend over there or that person over there was angry at me about it because they weren't getting the thing. And I feel like this is important to share. And I had a bit of a hesitation to recording this. Then I was like, no, I'm gonna record this because I know for a fact there are more women out there who are more of a musey and erotic lover, and, you know, more of like had that Vixen kind of energy that desires to just move through them. And this is the energy that I activate women with. I activate the queens with this energy if they are willing and open to receiving it. And I have found that a lot of people that title themselves as queen are often the hardest, not always, but they're often the hardest to be able to crack, to open to a really deep, succulent, erotic, devotional love. And it's not that they can't, it's just that they're not willing to go that deep, or they're not ready to go that deep. And so I invite you, I guess, today to really sit with the archetypes. And who are you really? And do you have shame around it? And if you do, the best way to move through the shame is to step into it. And I had a session as well, like a random session after my session with Richie today. I had a session with Rion Katie as well, my first one. And I've been recommended to him several times. And it wasn't until I had my session with Richie, where I went really deep into my unconscious, that the next step for me was to book in a session with Rion. And It was just like, you have to do it and do it now. And I did. And the energy that came out of me that was stuck in my body was ridiculous. Like, I cried, I had, like, you know, just aggression come out of me. I had just, like, I think you pulled a gross rope out of my solar plexus, which is like a tight knot around bringing more of this essence through me, which is me. And it's like, it's funny as well, because my name, Eleni, means beautiful woman. And I'm named after my grandmother, Eleni. And I feel we are given names in this lifetime that really resemble who we're here to be. And I find that so beautiful, and just such a gift when you're able to see things from a different perspective. You're actually, you can see yourself from, like, up here, and look down on what's going on in a situation, and really pull the pieces apart, and really come home to yourself. It's just bringing all these parts back and allowing yourself, giving yourself permission to take up space in the world, and not feeling like you have to self-abandon. And, you know, you would hear me talk a lot about self-abandonment, because I was somebody that self-abandoned so many times, and I made a lot of mistakes myself. I hurt people as well. But when we can bring all of these pieces together, forgive ourselves first, and then really, once we do that, we're able to forgive others. Once we're able to see ourselves in a different way, we're able to see others in a different way. And it all starts with self. And that forgiveness piece is a big one. And really forgiving life, self, and God as well for what we have been through, and finding peace with that. And then through that, we can access the joy, which is in between the suffering and also the pleasure as well.